All right. Good day to everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. I'm Jonathan Hadley on behalf of the Rudolf Steiner branch, and I'm pleased to host today our guest, Dr. Matthias Girke. He's a specialist in internal medicine, diabetology, and palliative medicine. He co-founded the Hospital for Anthroposophic Medicine, Gemeinschaftskrankenhaus Havelhöhe in Berlin, Germany, where he was head of internal medicine for 21 years. He continues to serve as a consultant and advisor and also sees outpatients there. He's a member of the Executive Council of the General Anthroposophical Society, and since 2016, head of the medical section of the School of Spiritual Science at the Goetheanum in Dornach, Switzerland. All right. So before I pass over the mic, I'll let you all know that during the presentation, I will disallow people from unmuting just to maintain orderliness. But after the presentation, there will be a question and answer period. And we'll negotiate how to do that when the time comes. All right. So with that, please, Matthias.
Thank you very much for your introduction and welcoming, and warm greetings to all of you, dear friends from the Goetheanum. I'm very happy that we can spend this time together, even in the electronic way. And for the new year, I wish you all the best, and I send heartfelt greetings to all of you. We have had in the last weekend a very important conference here in the Goetheanum, and this conference is linked to our topic, the Foundation Stone Meditation. We will speak about this meditation today. And this was a conference dedicated to the remembering of the burning of the first Goetheanum for 100 years. And it was really amazing to be together in the Sylvester Eve and Sylvester night with about 1,000 people in the Goetheanum, with a lot of performances and eurythmy and concerts and lectures, and really deep remembering of this burning of the first Goetheanum. And if you look at this first Goetheanum, then you find in a way a certain structure which is connected to the Foundation Stone meditation. If you look at this meditation, and hopefully you know this meditation since a lot of years, then you will find that the meditation is in a way composed in 4 parts, and you have in each part one stanza in the very beginning and a second one. And we will see that this is in a way similar to the building of the first Goetheanum. If you look at the main hall and the stage, both spheres of the first Goetheanum, then this is in a way the architecture corresponding to the structure of the Foundation Stone meditation. And if you look to the western part of the Goetheanum, and if you beware of the red window, then you see in a way a human face, and this human face is looking to the eastern part of the building, and it's in a way calling and asking the human being to develop and to become more and more a truly human being. And if you look at this red window, you have on the left side the abyss, and the abyss between the earthly world on the one hand, the spiritual world on the other hand, and the great or the huge difficulties to cross over this abyss, because there are so many hindering forces, beasts and other forces in the soul of the human being, which enable him to cross the threshold. And on the right side of the red window, then you see that the human being was capable to cross the threshold, to overcome the abyss of the spiritual world, and to be in a way connected to the beings of the spiritual world. And so you have in the western part of the Goetheanum the huge call to the human soul: develop and know yourself, become more and more a truly human being. And if you are looking towards the eastern part, then you see the sculpture made by Rudolf Steiner and Edith Marion, the representative of man, as the inner goal of this becoming a truly human being. And so you have a certain motive in the architecture and composition of the Goetheanum, even in the second one too, but there we have not the representative of men on the stage. But we have this composition which is really near to the composition of the foundation stone meditation. And I will start with a certain picture which might be helpful in understanding this very central meditation given by Rudolf Steiner. And this picture could make or can make clear what is the inner direction, the inner development which is announced, or which is in a way described in this central meditation of Anthroposophy. Because you can feel in 1923, in Sylvester Eve, the first Goetheanum was destroyed, by flames was burned, and then 1 year later, a new impulse was born out of the ashes of the first Goetheanum. And this new impulse is in a way related to the spiritual Goetheanum and the foundation stone, which is in a way present in the heart of all human beings deeply connected with Anthroposophy. This foundation stone of the spiritual Goetheanum, of the School of Spiritual Science and the Anthroposophic Society, is the foundation stone meditation. And in the next year, in the Christmas time, we will have the Christmas conference, 100 years Christmas conference, and we will speak about this relationship between the burning on the one hand and the new inner birth, rebirth of Anthroposophy, of the impulses of Anthroposophy entering the cultural life. And if you are looking at the foundation stone meditation, then at the very beginning, the human soul is asked. The foundation stone meditation starts with human soul, which is a certain call to the human soul, not to the human eye, interestingly, but to the human soul. And if you are questioning what is the inner sense of this, then we have to be aware that our I is still a developing spiritual being, and we are not very capable to develop the whole spiritual dimension of our I in our earthly incarnation. We are only an image, a picture of this I. And probably you know the meditation given by Steiner, and this meditation had the headline, how to to come to the inner human being, to the spiritual I and spiritual being of our human situation. And then this meditation starts. I look into the darkness. In it, light arises, living light. Who is this light in the darkness? I myself am it in my reality. This reality of the I does not enter into my earthly existence. I am only the image on it. This reality of the I does not enter into my earthly existence. I am only the image of it, but I shall find it again when I, full of goodwill and effort for the spirit, have passed through the portal of death. And this means have passed through the threshold to the spiritual world. And we now can understand that in our earthly existence, we have in a way a certain small I, and we have in the spiritual world a huge spiritual being, which is our higher I, and our inner development consists in the way from our earthly existence, step by step, to achieve it, to become more and more a truly human being. And this is the goal of the Michael School, of the School of Spiritual Science, of all anthroposophic development, to become human and to become more and more a true human being. And if we feel our all-day situation, we can feel depressed, we can feel euphoric, and we have so many inner feelings. This is like the sun on a cloudy or other kind of heaven. And we have to develop the inner situation towards this truly human being, the I, the spiritual being, which not enters our earthly life. And if we bring this in a certain drawing, then we can say, here we have the human soul, in which the I is living, and then we have the development of the human soul towards the spiritual world, towards our inner spiritual being. And this is the inner goal of anthroposophic development, to become this truly human being. And if you look at the foundation stone meditation, then you have in the first part of each of these three parts the way from the present situation of the I in the human soul to the inner spiritual being, which is living in the spiritual world. And you can say the first part of the foundation meditation goes in this direction, is in a way starting in our present situation and then leading to the spiritual being. And so you have the very beginning, the call to the human soul, and then that this human soul may seek for the connection to the spiritual world, to be in the spiritual world with their spiritual beings. This is the first part. And all these first parts of the different stanzas starts with human soul, you live in the limbs, and so on. And then the way is to come from the soul, from the present situation, to the macrocosm, to the spiritual world in which we can find our truly I. And then you have a second part of the foundation stone meditation, and this starts in this spiritual world and is in a way the way back from the macrocosm to the microcosm, to the souls of the human being. And I will draw it in another color. So you have in the first part of the foundation stone meditation the way which is capable to bring the spirit of our souls and to unite this spiritual being with the spiritual world. This is in a way the Michael way to develop our inner situation. And then the second way is not the way of the human beings. It starts that the Father God, the Trinity, is mentioned in the foundation stone meditation, the world of the gods, the Trinity. It's not the human being, it's the Trinity which is mentioned in the second part of the main stanzas of the foundation stone meditation. And then the path comes from the Trinity to the hierarchies, then to the elementary beings, and enters the human souls. And so you have a certain breathing in the foundation stone meditation. On the one hand, in a way, an out breathing from the present situation of our soul to the spiritual world on the one hand, and then an in breathing coming from the macrocosm and the spiritual world to the human soul. And if you are interested to make a comparison, then you can say this is in a way the process which the soul takes if we fall in sleep. Then we left our conscious situation in our earthly incarnation and we fall in sleep, and we are diving into the spiritual world. And if we come back in the morning, then we bring back a lot of spiritual impulses in our human soul. But in contrast to the sleep, this is now a conscious way. It's not a sleeping, because probably you know the nice description by Steiner that it is so easy to come into the spiritual world. You only have to sleep. Then you have crossed the threshold, but without consciousness. And now we have the task to develop consciousness in this passing the threshold, which we are doing each night now with consciousness. And we can say the impulse which is related to this bringing light into darkness is linked to Michael. Michael is this spiritual being which helps us to bring light into the darkness. And it's really interesting to make clear that we have different light qualities. If we look in our surrounding, if we see the sun shining in our life, then we have a lot of light, but in the same time, we have a lot of darkness. And if you are climbing a mountain and if you see the stars, and now you be aware, or you can see the moment in which the sun rises, then the whole light of the sun is in a way enfolded, and you have a bright light in your surrounding, and the light of the stars of the spiritual world disappeared. It's not visible. And so you have in each moment in which you have opened eyes and in which you see the light, in your surrounding, you have at the same time the darkness of the spiritual world. And the inner way consists that in this, that we have to bring light into this darkness of the spiritual world. And all these qualities of inner spiritual light are linked to the Michael being. And so this is really a very important way related to the anthroposophic kind of development, of inner spiritual development. And this is the other situation. This is not the activity of the human being. Here is the Father God, the Son God, the spiritual, the Holy Spirit. They are working in the spiritual world, and the working of the Trinity is in a way influencing the working of the hierarchies, and then entering in the sphere of the living etheric situation, and then entering the souls of the human beings. And if you hear the first verse of the foundation stone meditation, then you can feel this movement, and you can understand that we have a certain structure in this way, because there are very important steps which are in a way developed in this way from the soul in the earthly incarnation to the spiritual world. I will tell you the first verse of the foundation stone meditation, and to come in more details and to deepen our understanding. Human soul, you live in the limbs which bear you through the world of space into the ocean being of the spirit. Practice spirit recalling in depth of soul, where in the wielding world creator being, your own eye comes to being within the eye of God, and you will truly live in human world being. And if you see this first stanza, this first part of the foundation stone meditation, then you can be aware that it starts with the call to the human soul. And in each verse, which is connected to this first step, you find a description of the life, of the living of the soul in the threefold body. You live, you, the soul, live in the limbs, live in the heart-lung beat, in the beat of heart and lung, and live in the resting head. And there are three kinds of living of our soul connected to our organism. And if you look at the metabolic limb system, you have a lot of life forces. And it's so amazing to see how many blood cells are created by the bone marrow each day. More than 2,500 millions of blood cells, red and white blood cells, are created by the bone marrow, and you have a lot of life in the bones, in the bone marrow, and in the metabolic limb systems. And if you move the limbs by your soul, and if the soul is entering in this unconscious world of the metabolic limb system on the lower part of our organism, then it's one kind of life of our soul in the metabolic limb system. And then you have another kind of breathing of a life in the human soul. If you look at the rhythmic system, at the beat of heart and lung, and there is very important to recognize that Rudolf Steiner speaks about the polarity in a way of heart and lung. And if you are questioning in which this polarity consists, then you can imagine that the heart is forming an inner space. You have something in your heart, and the heart is not open to another person or to the outer world. It's creating a warm and inner space. And if you are looking to the lungs, then the lungs are opened to the outer world. You have a breathing connecting the inner situation of the human being to the outer world. Breathing means connection, to build bridges between the inner world, the outer world. And if you like to form vowels, which is gesture which corresponds to this functioning of heart and lung, then you can say the O in the eurythmic gesture is in a way forming the inner space. And if you have the R, then you have the opening of the lung. And in a way, in the rhythmic system, you have the alpha and the omega of the inner life of our soul. The inner space, the inner sphere, the warmth in our heart, and the opening of our soul, and the breathing, the beat of heart and lungs is in a way the healthy process. And we know from the medical point of view that the breathing and the heart frequency variation due to the breathing is a certain sign of health. And Rudolf Steiner makes clear that all healing processes are related to the rhythmic system and are related to the breathing. And so the rhythmic system is the origin of health. And we have to support this beat of heart and lung to improve the healing processes. Now you have the second kind of life, of the soul in the threefold organism. One is the unconscious life, the metabolic limb system. Then you have the dreaming feeling in the middle of the human being, the rhythmic system. And then you have the life in the resting head, and this means the thinking. Thinking is a kind of light, of inner light. And we have a lot of thoughts, but we have to create an inner life of the soul in our thoughts. And this is the third kind of life in which we can find in our threefold organism. The life of the soul in the depth, in the metabolic limb system, the life of our soul in the middle system, in the rhythmic system, and the light in the heights of our human organization in the nerve sense system. And if you bring this into an imagination, then you have the heights and the depth in the upright position of the human body. This is one axis, and this axis is in a way connecting the life forces in the metabolic limb system to the life forces in the thinking. The connection of the depth on the one hand and the heights on the other hand. This is the upright axis, the upright position of the human being. And if you are questioning what is the gesture in the breathing, then you have the center and the periphery. And in a way, you have the horizontal line, which connects the inner sphere of the human being with the surrounding, with the cosmos. And so you have one axis in this direction and one axis in this direction. And this is forming a cross. And I think it's very touching to say that we all are in a way bearing in our threefold organization, the cross in the upright axis and the cross in the horizontal way. And this is one of the main starting points of the foundation stone meditation. And you can be aware that the foundation stone meditation is deeply related to the mystery of Golgotha, to the cross. And you find this cross even at the very beginning in the stanzas of the foundation stone meditation. Now you have the first step, we can call it the living of the soul. In the foundation stone meditation, this is the first stop, first part. The very beginning is the call to the human soul, and then a description, what is the human soul doing in the organism. The soul is living in the limb system, in the beat of heart and lungs, and in the resting head. And then you have a next very important step in each stanza of this foundation stone meditation, and these are exercises. This means to practice spirit recalling or remembering, to practice spirit sensing, and to practice spirit beholding. And this is now the next step, that we have to see how we can form or how we can transform our inner situation of our soul. First, the working of the soul in the human body, and then the next step is the transforming of the soul, change processes to develop a truly thinking, feeling, and living. And so the first exercise is practice spirit recalling or remembrance. And if we are questioning what means spirit recalling, then we can see into our biography. And I think if we look to our biography, we will find some motives which early occur in our incarnation, our biography, and which are very important for us. I will give you an example. In my hospital, we have had a surgeon, and in breaks, I have asked them how the decision was found to become a surgeon. And this was so amazing that one of the surgeons has answered that early in life, with 3 years, he or she has operated little teddy bears, and a certain kind of helping of to be a surgeon in very early times was seen. And so you can find a lot of impulses occurring very early in life, which are important for the whole life. And not only for the profession, but even for diseases. It is very interesting. I have asked some patients, is the cancer disease or other diseases a certain surprise for you? Or do you have known this, that such things could come? And some patients have described that they have since a long time, especially since childhood, even since youth and childhood, a certain feeling that such things can come. And a very important artist is Jacqueline Dupré. Probably you know the first wife von Daniel Barenboim, a very famous cellist and artist. And this, in the age of 8 or 9 or very young years, this very famous person spoke to her sister, "Please don't say it, Mom. If I'm about 40 years, I will be unable to move and I will die." And now probably you know the destiny of this very famous musician. She has had multiple sclerosis, was unable to play the cello, and has died very early. And you see some signatures, some motives are in our biography, even as a certain spiritual background. And you can find it if you are looking for main goals or main impulses, even if you are questioning how you have met Anthroposophy. It's really amazing to see what is the inner impulse to meet Anthroposophy or other friends, the partner or something like that. And then you can see there is a certain message or a certain motive or impulse coming into the earthly life, and it's what is not created or built in the earthly incarnation. This is coming from the pre-birth time. And if you are interested how we can train it, then we have a very important hint given by Jürgen Smith for many decades. And he described that we can use the exercise given by Rudolf Steiner to make the difference of the essential and non-essentials of our life. If we train this and if we are interested to become aware of those things, that we are able to create moments of calm and be aware of things which are essential and others which are not essential. And if we get a feeling, then we train or we practice step by step a certain kind of recalling, of spirit recalling, of spirit remembrance, because it's not the biographic remembrance, it's a remembrance crossing the threshold in the time before birth. And what is coming out of the spiritual world entering in our biographic situation. And this is one possibility to get a certain idea what is meant with spirit recalling. And if we are questioning what is meant with spirit sensing, then you find in this word, in the German original version too, the double meaning of sense. Sense in a way as a certain meaning, and sense as the organs, senses as organs we use to see the world. You have the senses, the perception level on the one hand combined with the meaningfulness, with the sense. And this is in a way brought together in practice sensing. And if we are questioning what could be an exercise for spiritual sensing, then for my opinion, I would say it's the Rosicrucian meditation. If you look at the black cross with 7 red roses, and if you build up in the preparation this inner image, then you have element of the world of senses, the black wood and the black cross and the 7 red roses, and you combine it in a new way, in a new sense, in a new meaning. And the meaning is the inner development from the earthly situation of our soul coming more and more to the eternal spiritual being. And this is the inner situation of the Rosicrucian meditation of the black cross with 7 roses, which are in a way combined to this Christian symbolism in a certain manner, which is deeply related to Michael, because all changing processes which are in a way related to the inner development are impulses which are reinforced by the being of Michael. And you have a certain coming together of the cross on the one hand and the inner working of the archangel Michael on the other hand. And so you can practice sensing it. There are a lot of other aspects, but I will point out this aspect for practical reasons. And if you are questioning what is meant or how to train the practice of spirit beholding, then you can see that if you are looking into the world and if you are understanding that all things you can see with your senses, with sense perceptions, are in a way a gesture, a certain writing by the spirit, and that the real situation is behind a threshold, and that you have a gesture, and you find this in the world of senses. In Germany, we have had a very famous poet and philosopher, Friedrich Schelling, born in 1775. He has died in 1855, and this philosopher has spoken about nature, and nature is in a way the visible spirit. He has seen that we have such a wisdom in nature and such wisdom in all things which are visible in our surrounding, that this is visible spirit. And Friedrich Schiller has spoken about the human task. Friedrich Schiller has written a Theosophy of Julius. And in this Theosophy of Julius, he has spoken about the task of the human being to find in the nature, in all things we can see in our surrounding, the spiritual drawing of God, the concepts, the inner spiritual aspects, the spiritual ideas, one can say, of God, which are realized in nature. And so Schiller was convinced that the human task is to come from this second drawing of God, which we call nature, to the first drawing, to the thoughts of the world, in the spiritual world. And this is in a way related to the practice spirit beholding, because we have to see how we come from the outer aspect more and more to the spiritual dimension of the world. And this is in a way a very important Michael impulse to understand nature and all things which we are visible by our senses as hints, as certain aspects which are showing the spiritual dimension. And so we have a second step, and the second step is in a way a transforming of our soul, a certain enunciation, a certain changing in our soul forces. And then we have a third step, And this third step is the development of the truly thinking, of the truly feeling, and truly living. And this means, if you look at our normal situation, we have a soul which is centered to the own personality. We have, in a way, a certain egocentric attitude in our soul, and we need a certain development of a deeper feeling, that the feeling becomes more and more a sense organ and is capable to unify with the outer world. And this is a gesture of love, of course, to be more in the surrounding than in your inner situation. And if I have had a lot of possibilities to accompany dying patients. And one patient has written for me a poem in which she has described the inner change during dying. And this means to come from the centered inner world more and more, step by step, to a deeper relationship to the outside world, to the surrounding. That the inner world is in a way in the periphery. And this is the main situation. You find it in childhood, where the I is more in the periphery and then incarnated in the body, and the dying is the opposite process, the leaving of the I situation, I from the body, the separation from the body, and the connection to the spiritual world. And it's so amazing that dying is, in a way, the way from the centered human soul to the periphery. And this means to feel, in a way, with the beings of nature, to be in contact, to unify with all these things of nature. But normally we lose our consciousness if we are doing this. If you are looking at the blue sky, and if you stop all thinking about nice things and even the sky, and if you are dive into the inner experience of the blue color, then you can feel that you can lose your consciousness and fall asleep. And this is the bridge, in a way, which demonstrates us what is the inner situation of falling in sleep. We are losing our normal situation and connecting to the outer world, the periphery, to the spiritual world. But now it's needed that we develop a new consciousness. And this is the fourth step. And this step is called, and you will truly live in human world being, or and you will truly feel in human soul working, and you will truly think in human spirit depth. And then you can feel in this verses that now the inner being is in a way developed in the spiritual world and can feel and will and live and think in a truly manner. And this is a certain communion with the spiritual world. And so you have 4 steps which are in a way the composition of this first verse. And you can find it without knowing this foundation. So meditation is a certain steps of inner development. You find your soul. You are in a way going to the living part, or through the living connections of your soul with the body, entering a development in your soul, relate to the thinking, the feeling, and the living, and then coming out of the normal incarnated situation, unifying with the spiritual world, and then developing new consciousness in the spiritual world, a future perspective of our inner development. And then you have, on the other side, the same situation. The second verse starts with the Trinity, the Father God, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And then out of this archetypal, or of this deep spiritual world, then the hierarchies are the next step, which is mentioned in the Foundation Stone meditation. And the hierarchies bring us the words which are really connected to our human development. And these words are that the human being is born out of the Godhead, or that the human being is in a way related to the Christ, that in Christ death becomes life, or that the human being is capable to awake in the spirit's world thoughts. And if you look at these Rosicrucian words, then they are in a way describing the developing of mankind, how we are born out of the God, how we are in a way living our life, and that we are capable to find our karma and destiny. But in the same way that we have to overcome a lot of things in our soul to develop towards the inner spiritual goal, the inner eternal individuality of our being. And this means a lot of things must die, and we have to leave them in order to develop more and more in inner spiritual being. And this is in a way related to this: in Christ, death becomes life. A lot of things have to die. And in this, in new possibility, spiritual development can arise. And this is in a way the next step. And then we have a last step. I have to paint it. And the last step is in the same way related to the living forces. Here we have spoken about the living forces in our organism. Now we are in the elementary beings. And in all this world of the etheric aspects of our world, there you have the working of the spiritual world in the upbuilding of our organism, in the creation of nature and all things of nature. And now there is the big hope of the spiritual world that human beings hear it. And so you start in the human soul and you see 4 steps of development towards the individuality, the eternal individuality. And then this is the human way, and then you have the macrocosmos, spiritual way, starting with the Trinity and leading towards the earthly situation, and human beings may hear it. And then you are here for a second time. And this is related to the will, to the metabolic limb system. Then we have the same way in the rhythmic system, and in the third stanza, in the nerve sense system, human soul. You are living in the resting head. And then a new quality arises. And this is really interesting, that now you have the forming of community. And this is the fourth stanza, in which you find a certain coming together. The fourth part of the foundation meditation starts with a remembering at the turning point of time, in which the spirit light of the world entered the stream of earthly being. And then in the same part is pointed out that darkness of night had held its way. And now radiant light enters in human souls. And then here is spoken about not the individualized human soul, but now the human souls. Now we are not in the part of the individual development, but now we are looking in the forming of community. And this comes to the situation that the light, which is related to the Christ Son, should warm our hearts, enlighten our heads, that good may become what we from our hearts would found, what we from our heads direct with focused will. And now we have the we. And this is in a way the inner building of communities. And this community is a spiritual one, because, you know, we have traditional communities, families, and other associations born out of the past in a way. And we have communities which are born out of the presence. If you have a team in a hospital or colleagues or something like that, then you have a certain team in the present time. And then you can focus on a common goal in a future direction. And if you look at the end of this fourth part of the foundation meditation, then a future perspective is mentioned. The inner attitude is towards a future, a spiritual perspective, that good may become what we from our hearts would found, what we from our heads direct with focused will. And this is future orientation. And so you have communities which are orientated to the future and which are based on individuals, on free individuals. It's in a way a Pentecost community, a community which is really based on the individuality, developed individuality. And now you can understand that you need at first the inner way of development of individualities and coming back to the soul. And then you can go to the second situation, to form a community. And this community is, on the one hand, in the year 1923, the Anthroposophic Society, but on the other hand, there are mankind aspects in forming communities. And if you are looking at this picture I have mentioned, of course, you will see a sphere in the upper part, a smaller sphere in the lower part, probably a certain shape of the Goetheanum. But if you draw another line, which is in a way this line, then you have in this way the spiritual world. And if you look in the lower part, then it is described that light shines into the earthly being. Here we have the earthly being. And so you have a threshold, and the threshold is in the human soul. The soul could be directed to the spiritual world on the one hand, and can be orientated and working in the earthly world. And so you have this, I think, very important figure to understand and to feel in a deeper way with the foundation stone meditation. If you see this part coming from the earthly soul situation to the spiritual one, and then the way back, and then the entering into the earthly being in all these things we will do, and which we are accompanying with the hope that it will be good, what we are interested to do. And now you have the heights, the depth on the one hand, you have the horizontal line, and it forms for a second time, another time across. And at this time, I will stop this consideration, because it would be very interesting to see how the 7 rhythms of the foundation stone meditation are in a way linked to this landscape, and that we can try to live with the rhythms to deepen the foundation stone meditation. Because for my opinion, I'm convinced that it is really necessary to live with this meditation, even if we have in the next year 100 years of Christmas conference. And you all, if possible, are very warmly invited to come to the Goetheanum and to celebrate this conference with us, and to live with foundation stone meditation, which is really the basis of the whole Anthroposophic Society on the one hand, and the School of Spiritual Science, the different sections. And probably you know the picture which Rudolf Steiner has given at the end of the conference, or during the conference of the Pentagon Dodecahedra, and he spoke about this foundation stone and the substance, which is the substance of love. And then you have the structure, the shape, the Pentagon Dodecahedra form. And these are the world imaginations forming the substances, or the substance. And then you have the shining light, the gold light, which is the third aspect. And this life and this forming imaginations and the light are in a way together in the foundation stone. And if we are practicing this meditation, we are forming in our soul, in our heart, this foundation stone. And for my opinion, it's a really important source for inner forces, for hope, and for all blessing of those things we will do in the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, we'll open things up to questions and answers. I'll mention briefly before I allow people to unmute. We'll make it work one way or another, but I'll ask that if you have a question that you indicate so by raising your hand. You can hit the reactions button, and and use a raise your hand. For those of you on the phone, you can dial *9 to indicate the request for a question, and then *6 will unmute. So I will now allow you to unmute yourselves. But yeah, please, if possible, indicate your desire to ask a question.
I first have the question, could you see my drawing? Because I read in the chat that it wasn't possible to see it, but at the end you could see the drawing, isn't it?
Yeah, when people were first writing that, it was still a blank canvas.
Okay.
So thank you. I see Helena is unmuted. Did you have a question? Eva?
Hello. I would just like to ask if you could explain a little bit more about the rhythms, because these rhythms are always mentioned. And could you say something more about the rhythms? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, this is, I feel, a very important topic, but probably too much for the evening. I will show you a certain inner structure of the rhythm, and I think this could be the first part of an answer. And if you look at the structure, then you have in each case 3 exercises at the very beginning. Practice recalling, spirit recalling, practice spirit sensing, practice spirit beholding. This is in a way the first line of the rhythm. And then you have a second line. And if you look at the first rhythm, then there is described spirit recalling. This is this part. And your own I comes to being within the eye of God. This is the second part. And if you look at practice spirit sensing, then you find in the second line, your own I with world I unite. This is the second situation. And if you look at the third exercise, and these are the third exercise, spirit recalling, spirit sensing, now spirit beholding. And then you have here in the rhythm, the line, on your own eye, bestow for your free will. And this means that here you have the microcosm in a way. And in other rhythms, or in a lot of rhythms, this is the line related to the macrocosm. And now you have these 3 parts of exercises, and here you have a threshold between the inner world of the soul. I will reflect to the first rhythm, and now the connection to the spiritual world, the macrocosm, and you have, in a way, such a breathing situation between the microcosm of the soul of our souls and the connection to the spiritual world. And it's so amazing that you have this structure in the first rhythm, in the second rhythm, in a way in the third rhythm. The second is a little another kind. And if you look at the fifth rhythm, then you have the situation which is in a way similar, but you find another gesture. You have in the drawing of Rudolf Steiner the spirit recalling written on the blackboard in such a manner. Then you have spirit sensing in this way and spirit beholding in this way. And then you find the closing words of that will be good, what we will do out of the light of our heads, out of the warmth of our hearts. And these are in a way the closing lines. And then Rudolf Steiner makes a circle about all these three parts. This is the fifth rhythm, and this is the first rhythm. And you see in this rhythm in which we reflect the community building, you get a completely different drawing on the blackboard, even with the spiritual recalling in this manner and beholding in the other. And it's in a way formed into a circle pointing to the community building. And so you have, it's a very short and abbreviated consideration. You have the breathing between the inner world, the outer world, in a lot of rhythms. And this according to the threefoldness of the human being. And here you have the community building in the fifth rhythm, which shows us a certain circle. And if you are looking at the rhythms, then you can see that the rhythms are placed in this lemniscate from the first drawing, and that you can live with the first rhythm, the second rhythm, then the third, the fourth, come back to the fifth rhythm, and then the sixth, in which is mentioned the Christ Son, and then the last seventh rhythm, which is related to the activity of the human being according to the working of the Trinity. And so you have a certain lemniscate in the rhythms, and the rhythms are helpful to give a certain mood for the different days. And probably you know that Rudolf Steiner mentions this or rhythms first on Wednesday, on the Mercury day. And I think Mercury day is the day of Raphael, is the day of the healing forces. And the whole topic, how to cross the abyss and how to overcome the separation from the spiritual world, is really a Mercury process, a healing process. And the rhythm starts with the Mercury process, and then you can follow this rhythm day by day, and we can live with them. And it's really a deep possibility to bring alive this foundation stone meditation.
Thank you much. Richard has his hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I would like to ask a question because in the late 80s, I attended a conference on the foundation stone meditation in Chicago, and these words were given to me for the second panel and the third panel. And the second panel, instead of sensing, I was given spirit meditating, and the third one, I was given spirit envisioning. And to me, before your explanation, those two things just made more sense for me in regard to practicing as opposed to sensing and beholding. So I just wanted to know the validity of that, those other two things.
Yes, I think it's really, really, really difficult to translate this meditation into the English language. And we have a lot of translation. And this translation I have used is from UK, is from Marietta Bonschoten with others. And if you look at the second exercise, which was translated practice meditating, then it's a very practical hint, but it's not mentioned in the foundation stone meditation. Rudolf Steiner hasn't spoken about practice meditation. Meditating, she spoke about Geist besinnen, and it's really, really difficult to translate it. And for my opinion, it is probably a new possibility to live with this word if you refer to practice spirit sensing, because in the German you have the double meaning of senses and meaning in a way. And this is combined in the word spirit sensing in the same manner, I feel. And so this could be nearer to this, which is the original form in the word in the German meditation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see there was a question written into the chat. I'll try to read it aloud. Where you had the star at top, could you see this the midnight hour, when it turns with Archai Michael, a becoming of what has been offered?
Yes, in a way, there are different aspects. What is the star at the top? And if you start with a very near perspective, then you can see, if you look in the eyes of a really matured human being or a patient near the death, the last looking through the eyes, then sometimes you can see a certain inner spiritual being which is really on the top and is really there's an inner growth and maturation which is really astonishing. And so you can see in some situations or in our life, even in the earthly incarnation, this light of the eternal human being. And then, of course, if you follow the meditation, how to develop the I have quoted at the very beginning, then our deep I or eternal existence is, of course, in the spiritual world. And we have, in a way, images or pictures. We have a certain mirroring in our soul of this eternal I. And if we are crossing the threshold, coming to this midnight situation, then there is the inner origin or the inner home of our spiritual I. And all these things we can bring out of this origin could be brought in our earthly existence. And this is probably mentioned in the question, that we bring a lot back in our earthly existence. And for my opinion, it is very useful to feel after awakening the inner mood coming out of the night, because then you have a certain situation, a certain feeling in the soul, and you can dive into this inner feeling and to come in contact with these things you have experienced before the awakening. And this can be a certain happiness, or probably a certain sadness, or a certain impulse, or a certain new idea, inspirations in your soul, which are brought from the eternal spiritual world in our earthly situation.
Thank you very much. I see no hands raised, but I see that a number of people have unmuted. Barry, did you have a question?
I have a question.
I'm sorry?
Claudia has a question.
Yeah. Yep, please.
Okay. I am reading the book by Angela Locher, which she describes the building of the Goetheanum and the development of speech formation and so forth. And in it, she describes how Max Benzinger, who was the smith for the foundation stone, the physical foundation stone, and she describes how inside of the foundation stone are two pyrites. And Rudolf Steiner indicated that they had to float. And I was very intrigued by that. And I was wondering if you could say something about those two pyrites, because I've never heard of them before reading this book.
Yes, in the foundation stone meditation, and even in the Christmas conference, Rudolf Steiner speaks about one pentagon dodecahedra and not the double one. And the foundation stone of the first Goetheanum was the combination of two pentagon dodecahedras made in copper.
Yes.
The substance was copper. And then on a certain was the pyrites were fixed in the center of each pentagon dodecahedra. And if you look at pyrites and what, from the chemical point of view, then pyrites are in a way the synthesis or the joining of iron on the one hand and sulfur on the other hand. And this is a very interesting situation. All pyrites are, you find gold in a very small amount in pyrites. And if you look at the Michael imagination, then you find the iron on the one hand and the sulfur process at the other hand. And for my opinion, it's really connected to Michael. And then you have the gold, and even the gold shines out of the pyrite crystals. And this is a sun quality probably. And you have the pyrites, which are formed as small pentagon dodecahedras with 12 pentagons, and these are the 12 directions in the cosm, the zodiac, and something like that. The different radiation coming out from the macrocosm, forming a stone or a metal, and this is combined or developed by the unification of iron on the one hand and then sulfur on the other hand. And sulfur is really more with the metabolic processes related, and then you have the iron, the sword of the Michael on the other hand, and the gold, small amount of gold in the pyrite crystals, probably related to the sun. And this is, for my opinion, a very touching situation, which is the foundation stone in the Goetheanum. And the foundation stone is still in the earth of the Goetheanum. It's in a way remaining at this place, in which on the 20th of September, the foundation stone was brought into the earth.
Thank you. Huh. And it had to float. He said, es musste schweben, it had to float.
Yes, yeah.
And then he had to figure it out. And then he showed it to Rudolf Steiner. And then Rudolf Steiner said, yes, that will do too.
Fine.
He had a hard time trying to figure out how to make these pirates float. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
And it's really an amazing constellation, because Rudolf Steiner was very aware that at the time of the foundation of the first Goetheanum, Mercury was in the scale. And if you remember that this was 6 o'clock approximately, then Mercury, the sun was probably near or under the horizon, and then you have Mercury, and then the scale, and this is a picture or an image from Michael. And it's really a deep constellation from the astronomical point of view, that Mercury is in the scale and is in a way bringing in a balance the situation.
Thank you very much. I see George has a raised hand, and there's a question in the chat. We'll
Yes.
start. Yeah.
With me?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I've always had a bit of a problem with the beginning of the second verse in the third panel. And I don't speak German, so I can't really judge it too well, but the typical English translation would say that the spirit's universal thoughts hold sway in the world being craving for light.
Mhm.
How is it that cosmic thoughts crave for light?
Yeah.
I always thought cosmic thoughts and light were synonymous, that thought is the supersensible element in light. And it's always puzzled me, this English translation. And then I came across Adrian Anderson's, the Australian anthroposophist, commentary on the Foundation Stone Meditation. And he brings this up, and he translates it from the German. I'll just read it out. For efficacious are the spirit's cosmic thoughts, invoking light into the being of the cosmos. It's not cosmic thoughts craving for light, because they are light.
Mhm.
It's the cosmic thoughts invoking light, bringing light into the cosmic being. I suppose that's the Holy Spirit within the other aspects of the Trinity. Can you comment on that at all, or
Yes.
from German? Because I
think-
don't speak the German, and I can't make a judgment myself.
Yes, I think I agree with your thoughts. For my opinion, human beings have a really deep task, and this is that they have to develop thoughts which can bring consciousness in the thoughts, spiritual thoughts of the spiritual world, because it's a new quality if human beings and the thinking of human beings bring this light into the cosmic thoughts, which are as thoughts a quality of light. But if you look at the rich lectures by Rudolf Steiner, then you can find the description that all thoughts we have, which are really abstract and which are in a way dead thoughts, are capable to bring dying to the world. It's not a living process, it's not a support of living forces, but a dying process. Our normal thinking is really, in a way, killing the world of the living nature and something like that. And I think one aspect of our climate catastrophe is not only the carbon dioxide and other things, but the inner relationship which we have as spiritual beings to the nature is very important too. And in this lecture, Rudolf Steiner describes that if we are capable to develop moral thoughts, if we develop in new light, then the earth can be changed into a sun or into a star. And this is the light for which the gods are in a way craving, or which is really, there is a huge hope in the spiritual world that a new light occurs through the human beings. And I think if we forget all spiritual thoughts, then we have really a darkness in the world. And this is, in a way, an earth eclipse. And if we are developing new spiritual thoughts, then a new light is shining to the spiritual worlds. And I think this could be, in a way, the craving of the spiritual world and the deep hope of the spiritual world concerning the human, related to the human being. And I was very touched by the question given by Rudolf Steiner. He asked the question, if there exists a religion of the gods, do the gods have a certain religion? And then, of course, we are human beings and we have a certain religion, but do the gods have a certain religion? And then he points out that the religion of the spiritual world is the developing the truly human being. And all we are, in a way, developing in our soul as light is, in a way, really wanted by the spiritual world, and it's the huge hope of the spiritual world, and we are, in a way, helpers or facilitators for the future development of the cosmos. And our thinking is, and our souls are, in a way, a turning and a starting point for new forces for the cosmos.
So are you sort of saying that in the German translation, it's trying to put forward that the craving for light is the gods craving for light in human thoughts?
Yes,
Abstract
but
thoughts.
if you develop human thoughts which are really spiritual thoughts, then you bring this light into the spiritual world. It's not only in the head and in human souls.
Yeah, but that's what the gods are craving for.
Yeah. They are craving for my understanding, that the light which is born out of the inner development of human souls is brought to the spiritual souls.
Okay. So what do you think of the other translation that for efficacy are the spirit's cosmic thoughts invoking light into the being of the cosmos? How does thought invoke light into the being of the cosmos? Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. I mean, thoughts will invoke light. Cosmic thoughts invoke light.
Yeah.
So they don't need to crave for it.
Yes, but
what you're saying is that what's really happening in this verse is that it's the gods are craving for light for human thoughts.
Yeah.
Craving to get the light into human thoughts to make them cosmic thoughts or pure thinking.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, but if you look at the Genesis, then you find the description of the development of the earth, and then God looks at the earth and he was convinced all things are done very well, but something is missing. And missing was the human being which is capable to build thoughts about the world. And this is really an amazing picture that God is aware that there is something is missing. And this is that a being in the world is capable to develop light, to bring to consciousness all these things which are created. And this, for my opinion, is related to this evoking or craving of light or for light.
Okay. That's a bit like, I suppose, as Rudolf Steiner mentions, points out that God parades creation before Adam, who names everything.
Yes, yes, that's, I think, the same.
Okay, thank you.
But
Go ahead.
Hello.
hello.
In the Goetheanum, in the first Goetheanum, there were these circles and columns, to my understanding, also representing the evolution of man and earth. And I always felt that the rhythms, the 7 rhythms or 8 rhythms, are representing the 7 evolutionary stages of the earth and of man. And I always could experience the first rhythm as a Saturn rhythm, the second as a sun, and the third in the developing our astrality. And that refers to the question also that George asked, is that we have to form our astrality to a light being, and so on. So I was always protesting the idea of that the first rhythm was a Mercury rhythm, because I could not feel Mercury. I always felt it was Saturn that I experienced in that, and yeah, so on. So and that also then the creation of the first rhythm is something that we are, the archetypal substance of the Saturn warmth, or is the physical kind of physical template, even when it is not physical but pure warmth. And you can also somehow experience that in that the own eye, not your own eye, but the own eye comes to being in God's eye, which is very much this warm quality. The same with even when it is this granting of the free will, which is also a warmth quality. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's possible that different versions can coexist parallel.
Yes, of course. And this is the wonderful situation in living things, that you can look from different perspectives. And I can feel your explanation about the rhythms. But if I think about the situation that the first rhythm is given on Mercury Day, and that is really the starting point of the inner development, then you can say on the one hand, the starting point of the cosmic development, this means the Saturn phase, or you can say it's the starting point of the inner development. And this means that, first of all, the human being is aware that something is to change in the 3 soul forces. And the goal is mentioned, that then our soul, our individuality can be unified with the spiritual world. This is, in a way, the goal of our development. And so this perspective occurs in the first rhythm. And I feel a relationship between the first sentence in the light sets and the guidance thoughts of Rudolf Steiner, in which he described that anthroposophy is a way of knowledge which brings the spirit in the human being in connection to the spirit of the world. And this way is in a way the substance of the first rhythm, because there you have the spirit in the own soul, and the spirit is asked for some exercises to develop the inner soul forces, and then the perspective is to unify this inner world with the world of the spiritual world. But I can feel that there are some perspectives, and there are other perspectives too. There is one big book published by Sergei Prokofiev, in which you find from a lot of different authors relationships of the 7 rhythms to the planets, to the days. And one is that the rhythm is not connected to the day in which the rhythm is spoken, but to the next day. And there are a lot of ideas, and one has to feel what is suitable for the own inner development and practice. And for my opinion, I feel these 7 rhythms are in a way an organism, and it's probably not so important to see at which day you have to meditate, or you can meditate to which rhythm, but to feel the inner growing and the inner development of an organism. And because of this, I have drawn the landscape, because this is in a way a nice figure which shows the inner connection and the organism and the structure of the rhythms.
Thank you. I had muted Bart because there was some feedback. I think you should be able to unmute if you have more you want to say. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. All right, I'll
move on.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, then I send you warm wishes to all of you. It was very nice to see you, even in small pictures on the screen. But I enjoy it to be with you, and that we can speak about this very, for my opinion, important topic. And that so many countries have joined together, even Israel and other countries, of course, too. I'm not quite sure, I only see the pictures.
Thank you. It is, if I understand correctly, 9:45 where you are. Should I take from that it's time to close down? Sounds good. Thank you very much. I'll stop the recording, and I'll leave the meeting up.
Yeah. Thank you so much.